So Longlegs has been out for about a week or so now, and we've all heard the discourse around this film. It's very divisive. You have some people who think it's very terrifying, some people who hated it. But I thought it was a good time to revisit the film's release, the marketing, the success it's having. Most importantly, talk about the significance, I think, for an original horror movie like Longlegs and the impact it's going to have on other horror movies going forward. I already did my review on this. This is not going to be a review, but if you want to see my review, click up here at some point. I'll put a link to it, see my particular thoughts. I made this video to talk about why I think Longlegs is going to impact horror movies in the near future. Why I think regardless of how you feel about the film, whether you love it or hate it, you should really be rooting for its box office success. And before I get into the reasons, just a reminder as always, join me in the comment section down below. Let me know your thoughts on any of these opinions I have. And if you haven't already, just a reminder, subscribe to the channel. If you like talking about new releases, scary stuff, videos like this, I do them all the time, so there will be more to come. But yeah, let's talk about the reasons I think Longlegs is going to be so impactful for horror movies going forward. Now, the first and most obvious, but yet probably most important reason on the list of the things I'm going to talk about is the fact that Longlegs was a completely original horror movie. And that's important because it comes at a time where the public discourse and the narrative surrounding Hollywood's that they're a bunch of lazy hacks. They have no original ideas. This was completely original. There's so many prequels and sequels out now. I feel like that's all people think gets made, but there's a little bit more originality than that. I'll get into that in a sec. But it's interesting because it highlights to producers and studios that you can turn a huge profit by supporting, smaller, independent and original projects. This movie's made like $20 million or something on its opening weekend, which is crazy for a horror movie nowadays. But a lot of my favorite movies this year were original. I think the trend is kind of continuing. We're getting sick of sequels and prequels. A lot of Marvel movies are bombing. These ones are not. Like I liked Abigail, this, Maxine, if you consider that original. I know it's part of a IP that it's a trilogy, but whatever, still original for the most part. Monkey Man. There's just a lot of films this year that were original. I think are kind of highlighting to producers and studios that you can turn a big profit if you do original. But for horror movies in particular, Longlegs stands out because it was such a hyped movie. This movie kind of reached the mainstream in which most horror movies never get to, which leads me to point number 2. That point being that depending on how you market and how you create a horror movie, I think you can really impact and reach mainstream fans of movies. There's this narrative in the horror community that horror is a different subsection of film than others, when it's really not. I think the average fan really just wants a good movie. It doesn't really matter what the genre is. And there's been so many lazy and derivative PG-13 clone movies like Tarot, The Strangers remake, these garbage movies that have absolutely no creativeness to it at all. They've kind of isolated horror fans from the mainstream where the average family member, probably doesn't care at all about horror movies anymore. They don't think they make scary movies anymore. You probably heard that. I think Longlegs is going to draw in a subsection of fans that had no interest in horror movies for a decade probably, because there's been so few. I know there are good ones if I go back and I list them. I'm not going to. But if you go back and you think there's so many derivative movies, these PG-13 Blumhouse movies, Longlegs is going to draw in the crowd of people that is kind of disenfranchised with horror movies, the Silence of the Lambs fans, the serial killer movie fans. And it's going to get them back on board with the fact that if they look hard enough, they can find good horror movies. When before this, they just didn't care. And I think that's really impactful because I never want to isolate any movie fans. I think everybody has different movies they enjoy. I think it's important to bring them back into the genre. There's good stuff in every genre. So I think it's really important that Longlegs was captivating enough to a subsection of fans that normally wouldn't actually go out and watch this movie in theaters to bring them in the theaters. I think that's telling in and of itself how effective the marketing it is, which is my next point. That point being the trailer and the marketing for Longlegs, in my opinion, is generationally effective and just phenomenal. As I said in my review, regardless of how you felt about this film, if you have interest of seeing it, not if you have, it is phenomenal how much hype this film garnered with just minimalistic marketing. How they showed you a little bit of teasers, they gave you a little bit of snippets, they did not tell you the plot. I'm somebody who follows movies and has a movie channel. I didn't know what this film was about going into it, and I saw all the trailers, all the teasers, and I loved it for that. I went into it completely blind. I didn't know the premise. I just knew it was about a serial killer and an FBI agent. And that is phenomenal in 2024 because this is a time where we get 2 to 3 trailers for every single movie. And we know all of the core plot points to it. We know all the action scenes, all of the kills, all the deaths. It's like they're afraid to not have you come to the theaters, so they just show you the whole movie in hopes that you'll just think it's so cool, you'll bypass that and come to the theaters, which is clearly not an effective strategy because movie sales are pretty much down and theaters are not doing very well. But Longlegs is interesting because, again, it revives the narrative that you can have a movie trailer and a marketing campaign be very minimalistic and involving of the fans. And it kind of makes me wonder how many studios are going to copy this approach and they're going to create horror movies without showing you all the jump scares, all of the cool scenes. Because, at least for me personally, all of my favorite movies of the past 5 to 10 years, I knew absolutely nothing about when I went into it. This one, Barbarian, I could name a dozen more. All of the movies that seem to have a lasting impact, we don't know anything about when we go into it. So my hope and my expectation, honestly, is there's a lot of studios that are meticulously watching this marketing campaign and they're going to copy it because the world is a copycat game. And they're going to say, you know what? Longlegs was minimalistic. Fans didn't know anything about it going into it. We need to keep a little bit more of the mystique to the movie alive before fans go into it, draw some buzz. People want to find out for themselves. And I definitely think in the next 2 to 5 years, we're going to get a lot more minimalistic trailers and campaigns because of how effective this was, especially on a low budget. If you know you can't show as much as fans want, keep it minimalistic, get people in the chairs, keep them intrigued. I thought that was probably the most genius part to Longlegs, if I'm being honest. And the last of the reasons, but probably the most abstract and fun reason I think that this film could really shape horror movies in the near future, I'll be really interested to hear your opinions, is because of Nicolas Cage in particular. I think because of his creative outlet and, the low budget approach, I really think that this film has the potential to influence a lot of actors and actresses to get into the horror genre, because obviously, as we all know, Hollywood is not really particularly fond of horror. They never really involve them in the Oscar process, all of this stuff. It's kind of like a snooty thing that, it's like such a low effort genre to a lot of people. And I think Nicolas Cage's approach to this and the fact that, again, he is an Oscar winner, he's an A-list actor, he's back in horror, he's kind of going all out. I think it might motivate a lot of actors and actresses to take a better look. Should they do horror? Should they kind of express themselves that way? There's a lot of fun to be had if you kind of take the right approach when you enter the genre. I'm really interested in seeing if we can get back to a time where some of the better A-list actors and actresses do horror again. If you're familiar with the timeline of films, if you watch a lot of them like me, it kind of pisses me off that we're at a time now where horror is synonymous with low budget, where you can't have funny, you can't have a big budget, you can't have known actors and actresses. Everything's like a Blumhouse production where you have like B-list actors at best who get the roles. You never really get the, Brad Pitt, George Clooney. There was a time in like the 90s where all we got was these 90s serial killer movies, The Bone Collector, Kiss the Girls, Silence of the Lambs. You had A-list actors across the board doing these films. And my hope is with Longlegs is that we'll get back to that. And some people will look at the fun Nicolas Cage is having, Micah Monroe and his performance, how people are saying they're deserving of Oscars. And you'll have more actors and actresses who will just have fun. They'll branch out a bit and they'll get back into what we used to have in the 90s. I miss that. So again, maybe that's just hopeless optimism is the fourth reason, but I really think that Longlegs has the potential to draw over people that left the genre and they want to come back. So yeah, this is just a list of things that were kind of floating around in my head when I was on a walk the other day, reading some of the discourse around this movie. Really interested in your opinions, as I said. Comment down below and let me know, do you think Longlegs is going to have more of an impact than just the box office like I do? Or do you think it's just going to be a forgettable film? Actually really interested in the opinions on this. I thought about this a lot. I've been reading so much divisive stuff about this movie. Just wanted to get some of my thoughts out there, let you guys in on some of my opinions, maybe something you didn't think about. Yeah, that's all I got in this video. As always, join me down below. See you guys in the next review.